Hi, I'm Ernest Koh. So I'm from Singapore. I'm currently doing my master's in history in Nanyang Technological University. Uh, it's also where I did my bachelor's. So yeah, mostly I'm full-time student trying to finish my thesis. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But for my research, basically, um, I'm interested in sort of developmental maritime economics, business structures and networks, comparative migration, religion, and diaspora. But for my thesis itself, I'm actually working on sort of a history of textiles in the 19th to 20th century. Yeah, so it's a little bit
Yes.
different from sort of Iranian and the Persian world.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
No, not at all. I mean, it's great. And thank you so much for joining us today, Ernest. And it's actually really
thank you
nice
for
to
having
talk to
me.
someone from Singapore. So I'm from Malaysia, so it feels really, it feels like I'm home
Neighbors.
almost. So it's really nice. Exactly. So it's really neighbors, exactly. So it's really nice. So that's great. It's that's interesting that you work on maritime networks, and
Yeah,
but you're looking at
um,
textiles. So
yeah. So economic history, the movement of commodities, textiles through the region, the different players and actors, and
fascinating.
also how these commodities sort of shape and reshape the local economy and the infrastructures. Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. It's really. Do you look at textiles from within the region or from sort of the wider world?
Oh, so initially I was working on batik for my final year project in my undergraduate years. So that
Hmm.
was more looking particularly at Indonesia and sort of the Malay world, and then also its early relations to the Dutch East India companies. So currently, I'm working more specifically on sort of a more recent period near the 20th century. So the whole textile industry boom during this period before we sort of transition to what we more commonly now wear, as like ready-made garments. There was an era where you didn't get to buy ready-made shirts. You had to get the textiles, and then you go to a tailor and they do it for you. So during this
Oh,
period
that's
of time,
true.
sort of the different actors, yeah. So we have things sort of like the retailers, the wholesalers, just the whole ecosystem going on. So that particularly and sort of Singapore's role in sort of the distribution, and also sort of the standard story you always hear in Singapore strategic location, and how commodity flow in and out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm working on right now.
No, that's very, very interesting. And no, thank you for sharing. I was just genuinely curious. Well, good luck with the rest of the thesis writing, and
Thank you.
I'm sure it'll go very, very well. But of course, I'm talking to you today about the Parsi community in Singapore,
Yeah.
which was an article that I came across that you wrote. And if it's okay, I'd like to learn more about that. And a good place to start is what led you to pursue learning about the Parsi community in Singapore. And perhaps before
So
you
right now,
start, could you just, sorry, just briefly explain what the Parsi community in Singapore is and who they were and are?
hmm. So the Parsi community in Singapore, well, they're really a very small group in Singapore. So about 300 to 400 who are registered with the Parsi International Association of Southeast Asia. So they came to Singapore. The first Parsi who came to Singapore was around the time where Raffles came to Singapore. So
Very
it
early
was
on.
yeah, very early on. So the the standard story that we hear is he was a fugitive who was sent over because we were a penal colony back then. So um, after that, when he passed, there was actually no Parsi cemetery of sorts in Singapore. So they actually wrote to the Parsis in China to ask for a bit of money, and then they donated it, and then we had a Parsi cemetery in Singapore, and he was buried there. And subsequently, more and more of the Parsi community came over from India, and then they established themselves in Singapore. And currently, uh, they have been here for a long time, and they've participated in a lot of charity work and also different activities that have contributed to Singapore's growth. Yeah, so they have been in Singapore for a long time.
I had no idea, and I find that really fascinating. And yeah, so sorry, I interrupted you. But to go back to the
No
original
worries.
question, is
Yeah.
what led you to pursue studying the Parsi community?
Oh, it actually started off as a class project. So it was a class on the migration, I think migration communities in Singapore. So the 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 job was to look for a community in Singapore, minority community in Singapore, to sort of interview them and sort of understand sort of the intergenerational changes, and sort of to document these changes in Singapore. So um, I'm a huge fan of Freddie Mercury. So
No, I think
this is
that's a
usually
great
where,
starting point. Oh, no, it's
yeah,
great. Me too. Me too. Me too.
yeah. So that's where it started. So it started out as a group project. So I had other members, Patricia, Amanda, and Geraldine. So we sort of didn't really have a head start of how to get in contact with them. So we decided to just drop them an email, and then surprisingly they were very, very nice, and they were like, yeah, just like come down and we'll talk. And
Oh,
then
that's so
we met
nice.
Mr. Hoshi Dibo, the Mr. Hoshi. So Mr. Hoshi was sort of core member in the community, and he sort of sat us down and sort of understood what we wanted. And then from then on, he and the community has given us like full support to do whatever we wanted to do, sort of document their history and sort of their stories in Singapore. Yeah, so it sort of all started off just as a class project.
So nice that they were so open. And but yeah,
Yeah,
please
they're really
continue.
welcoming. Yeah, so after which in so sort of after the group project, it sort of felt like a waste that I realized that not many people know of the Parsis, and even myself, I didn't really know that much about them. So after the group project, we felt the need to sort of give back to the community also, because it sort of doesn't really make much sense if we just document them and we keep it to ourselves. So we in 2019, we had a oh wait, no, yeah, 2019. Yeah, so we had a event at the National Library Board. They sponsored us a venue. So we had a talk that uh, we organized, and yeah, the amount of people who showed up was actually quite heartwarming. So a lot of people wanted to
Mm,
know about the community. So
right.
that's sort of my initial intention, because yeah, so I invited sort of a panel of Parsi members. So we had like people from the younger generation, sort of the older generation. We had a priest, we had a bunch of people, and then we sat down and then we had a moderated panel where the audience could ask some questions. They always wanted to ask. So we had this nice chat session for I think about yeah, it was quite a good session.
Yeah, that's a nice exchange as well, isn't it? Mm.
Yeah, definitely.
I see. And I mean, you mentioned that the Parsi community in Singapore is quite small, but are they quite a distinct community? As in, do they? I'm assuming they practice Zoroastrianism, but do they have any other specific defining features that keep them quite unique?
Um, I think Zoroastrianism is one of the most unique aspects of them, because it's also a really, really old religion, and we don't really hear of it much in Singapore, especially. Apart from that, I think the traditional dressing is actually very interesting. It's all in the full white. I think I have a picture to show you.
Oh yes. I think you in the article you
Oh yeah, yeah,
you
it's
had
in the
one as well.
article.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really interesting that
Mm-hmm.
we don't really see them dressed in this kind of traditional dressing outside. And
No.
for the sort of perhaps the general public, we might actually think that it looks sort of Indian because of the Indian
Right.
influence they had when
Of course.
yeah, during the
Yeah,
earlier
sure.
generations. Yeah, so those two particularly, and also sort of the different festivals and ceremonies and important dates they have. Yeah, things like the coming of age ceremony, and then yeah, and then they also have sort of the sass, where it's like plate where they have a lot of different things that represent different elements. And, yeah, so the entire worldview and their system, the belief system, is actually very interesting.
Of course, yes, that's true. And do you have a temple as well in Singapore?
Oh no, we don't have a fire temple in Singapore. So for Singapore, um, we have a Zoroastrian house. So that is where they actually carry out all their rituals. So they meet
Hmm.
every Sunday, I believe, if I remember correctly. So there'll be a morning session where there'll be so the priest will actually light a fire, and then we have in the family, children, we actually video part of it down. It's actually up on YouTube. So I could show it to you later if you're interested.
I'll
And
try
then
and link it. I'll try and link it to
oh,
this
sure, sure,
video.
sure.
That would be
Yeah,
good. So at least others people who are interested can see that. That's nice. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. Yeah, so it's actually more of a mini documentary by student made, so the editing is really rough around the edges.
No, you should see my videos. They're probably more rough. Not to worry. That's nice.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so it's really interesting. This sort of they also gave us permission to film because most of these rituals are really private. So they allowed us to film sort of the one of the more basic rituals. So they felt that it was okay for us to be there, and they went through the video and sort of represented them in a way that they very correctly said it. Yeah, so that's pretty it's pretty interesting.
It's nice to know that that you've been able to document that as well, especially for a community that I mean that's very small, but at the same time quite distinct. And I think that they're officially recognized as well in Singapore. Is that correct? Yeah,
Yeah,
as
they're
a
part of the
minority.
IRO. Yeah,
Sorry, what is the
so they
IRO? I'm
actually
sorry.
sorry, the Interreligious Organization of
Okay,
Singapore.
got you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
so it's basically where all the major religions in Singapore sort of a central group where it's non-governmental, but it's sort of for the leaders of each of these different faiths sort of to work together.
Right.
So we can maintain religious harmony in Singapore because we have so many different groups of people in Singapore.
Of course, of course. And how distinct are they in the history of Singapore? I mean, did they play any roles in Singapore's history? I mean, you mentioned a bit about charity, but did they play any other roles?
Yeah. So, for example, one of the current heart center in the national in a hospital. Oh my god, I forgot the hospital's name. Oh, Singapore General Hospital. Yeah, Singapore General Hospital. Yeah. So, uh, so the wing was actually donated by a Parsi merchant. So it's mentioned in the article where when he was sick on one during World War Two, slightly after World War Two, so he was really sick and he was admitted in the hospital. And then when he was out for a walk, he realized that why there's so many children, all sleeping along the corridor in sort of they don't really have proper like beds for them. So when he saw this, he asked the doctor like, "Why are they sleeping here?" And the doctor told him that, "Oh, it's because we don't have enough rooms, we don't have enough beds for them." So the doctor knew that he was businessman. He said, "Why not you donate some money to us?" And then after he was
Nice, good,
discharged,
direct.
he wrote a check.
Oh,
Yeah, he
wow.
just wrote a check for the doctor, and the doctor was like, "Yeah, you for real?" And then they managed to build sort of currently it's the National Heart Center, I believe.
Okay,
Yeah, they sort
okay.
of revamped it. Yeah,
Oh,
so
interesting.
it's actually a really
Wow,
Mr. Mystery is the name. Yeah,
I see. Wow.
yeah. So this and apart from that, we also the National Singapore's Dyslexic Foundation is also started off. One of the founder was also Parsi. Yeah. So they have been doing like these sort of charity work and sort of philanthropic work, but then it's all rather low key in a sense. Because definitely they from their point of view, sort of they're giving because they're helping out the sort of the less fortunate
Right.
and not
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
for their own gains. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Good deeds,
So
good words.
these
Yeah.
two examples are sort of the more prominent ones that
Wow. I
that
had no idea. I had no idea. And do you know much about the Parsi community in the region? Because you mentioned a Parsi association in Southeast Asia. This,
yeah.
I didn't know
So
that
the
that
Parsi
existed.
Zoroastrian yeah, the
So,
Parsi Zoroastrian Association in Southeast Asia, the PZAS. So it was actually established in Singapore. But however, most of the uh, Parsi community, based on what I've heard from them, they are generally mostly in Singapore. Not so much around Malaysia, not so much around Indonesia, and the sort of Southeast Asia region. I believe this is mainly because when they first came here, it was for business opportunities, and then the earlier years, Singapore was sort of the area where a lot of the merchants would gather. So, in my belief, it's probably why. And also, they will bring their family members and other friends, yeah, together. So Singapore, I believe, is one of the bigger communities of Parsis. Yeah, yeah, it's based on what I understand from them. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And thank you for that, and thank you for explaining all of that. And I was wondering, what were your main surprises or challenges studying the Parsi community in Singapore?
Mm. I think one of the main surprise, which was very pleasant one, was how nice they were. Because usually when we try and do field work and we sort of are seen as outsiders coming into prop and question your ways of life. So they were really, really nice and really, really open, and they invited us to join them. And time after time where we sort of uh, so they will even inform us when, oh, there's an event coming up, like for example, a certain family is carrying out a coming of age ceremony, and so they will actually invite us to go to a film for that. So they're really, really kind and open. They're really, really open to it. So that was one of the best, most pleasant surprise that we had. Challenges wise, I think one of the key challenges actually um, the language, the Persian language. So unfortunately, most of the
I see.
older documents that are written in Parsi, and not many people can actually read it anymore. So
Ah,
particularly for me,
all
that's sort of
right.
a big challenge.
I didn't know. Do they still write and speak in Persian?
No, they generally uh do not use the language anymore apart from the priest when it's conducting
Of
prayer.
course.
Yeah.
I see. I
So
didn't know
it's
that. That's
really
interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
We.
so actually a huge problem because like when we do our field work, we have to back it up with sort of like primary source research, and it's really challenging when I'm not able to understand a language, so I rely a lot on secondary sources instead. Yeah, and even secondary sources, there's very little on the Parsis. Yeah, as compared to like other fields of research. So it's definitely challenging to sort of balance what we hear and what we read, and sort of to give a more accurate sense representation of the community in Singapore. Yeah.
Sorry. Of course. No, that makes a lot of sense, and I didn't know that they wrote in Persian as well. So that's actually quite informative for me.
Yeah. Mostly the religious texts, but the community,
Sure.
they speak fantastic English. So most of our communications, all of our communications were in English. Yeah,
Of course. Right. Right.
yeah,
And
definitely. Yeah.
and what I mean, how do Singaporeans view, like the average Singaporean view the Parsi community? I mean, it's great that you've got your project to give them, to give them more prominence and sort of have more exchanges. But what is the general feeling? Do they know much about the Parsi community? Are they well known? Not at all.
They're not that well known, but I believe the interest is really growing because, well, also because like um, the reaction we got from sort of the event, and also like the opportunity that the National Heritage Board offered sort of to write an article to introduce them. Yeah, because when we first writing on the article, I was mainly focusing on sort of documenting and explaining sort of the intercultural, sort of the cultural changes within the community and different generation perspectives. But then they were more leaning towards sort of um, somewhat more of a general introduction of the community. Uh, yeah, and we currently there's this effort to document and preserve our intangible cultural heritage. So more and more people, or the general public, more and more people are interested in sort of these cultures in Singapore, which are generally more low profile in a sense. Yeah, so it's good that the general public is having a more it's good that the general public has a more keen interest in this different culture. I'm saying culture a lot.
No, that's. I think
Yeah.
that's a very accurate word. And thank you so much for answering my questions. And sort of as a way to wrap up, I have two final questions. Firstly, will you continue to pursue this project on the Parsi community? As in, will you keep making videos? And finally, what are your plans and whether you'd like to stay on in academia, if so?
Yeah, definitely. I would like to continue on this project because there's still so many aspects of the community that we could still discuss and still learn more for. Definitely, I would sort of my initial project was more like I mentioned the generational changes. So subsequently, I would like to expand it more, sort of to understand sort of the religious aspects of Zoroastrianism in Singapore and sort of different changes that has occurred since, initially in Persia and then in India and in Singapore, if there are any changes. So I'll be engaged in the community that probably after the whole pandemic situation. Yeah, because now it's a really tricky time to do field work.
Of course,
So
of
that will
course.
be, yeah. So that will be definitely something that I'm looking out for. Yeah, and it's I feel like since we have such a good rapport and relationship with the community, it'd be great to continue on doing the work. Yeah, so I'll definitely be interested in continuing this line of research. And as for myself, I hope to continue in academia. Um, Throughout these years, there's been many fantastic opportunities that has presented itself. So uh, I'll definitely be happy to continue in academia. I'm finishing up my master's right now and hopefully go on to a PhD. Yeah,
No, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for that, and I really hope that you'll pursue and continue your project with the Parsi community, as you said, especially because you have such a nice rapport and relationship, and they also seem to be very interested to get their story
yeah,
out there. So, and I think it's actually very important for all of us who are interested in Iran and the wider Persian world, and to sort of understand this community in somewhere far away like Singapore. It's quite unique for many people, and I think there's ample opportunity for a lot of kind of discussions about community identity, transnational networks, and as you rightly said, from Iran, Persia, India, Singapore. I think it's very, very interesting. So I look forward to seeing more, seeing more on that. And with your PhD, hopefully, yeah, you'll. Firstly, good luck with the rest of your thesis, your master's thesis,
thank
and I'm
you.
sure it will go very smoothly. And I hope to see you in a PhD program very soon. But Ernest,
Thank
thank you
you.
so very much for your time today. I really enjoyed listening to you and talking with you. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Miss. Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.